fun එක next level කරන dialogue fan blaster.
Tonight, on First at 9 this Friday, the 20th of December 2024. No EDCA. Foreign Minister denies claims of government agreeing to implement EDCA. Assures no pacts being signed that compromise Sri Lanka's interests. Decision pending. IMF to review Sri Lanka's new economic measures. Executive board to discuss the third review before releasing the fourth tranche worth $333 million. State sector overhaul. President reveals plans to streamline the public service. Local government and provincial council elections to be held within the next year. Sweeping reforms. Sri Lanka cricket announces sweeping constitutional reforms. Voting membership reduced from 147 to 60.
Chilo Dairy, Sri Lankawama Kiren Perata. Obe Vishwase dinu Sensodyne, then Langamati Pharmacy in Labagata Hacker.
Kanta parisang karagatot? Api parisang.
Asian Paints Causeway Aquasafe, Vesat Mattuig Gadarat Disney.
This is Derana First at 9. From Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Singh joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now taking you straight to your top story this evening, President Anura Dissanayake today asserted the government's aim to streamline the public service infrastructure, which is marred by inefficiencies and delays. While voicing the government's goal, the president noted that the expenditure on the state infrastructure is too high. However, the president vowed to not reduce the overall size of the government. Meanwhile, the president also claims that the provincial council and local government polls will be held within the next year.
The District Secretaries and Divisional Secretaries Conference was held at the auditorium of the Ministry of Home Affairs in Narahenpita under the patronage of President Anura Dissanayake. Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya also attended the conference.
The whole state sector has collapsed. The people have no faith that the public service is capable of fulfilling their requirements. We must ask ourselves whether we are ready to rebuild this collapsed system. Not only the political authority, but you, the public servants, are responsible and accountable for upholding the people's mandate. There is a question as to the purpose of some government institutions and positions. We need a new structure to create a streamlined state mechanism. Therefore, a cabinet decision was taken to appoint a committee chaired by the Secretary to the Prime Minister to conduct a review and ascertain which government entities must be disbanded, which must be merged, and which must have their purviews amended. We will go ahead with this project in spite of whatever negative political consequences it may have. We do not intend to reduce the public service. However, the expense it incurs is far too high. We must raise the public service to a better standard. We have selected 3 sectors to do that. The first is poverty eradication. The second is digitalization. Most importantly, introducing a digital ID. Then within 3 to 4 years, most tasks of the state sector must be digitalized. The third program is the Clean Sri Lanka project. This is not about cleaning the environment, but creating a change in attitude with regard to respect for the law. We will initiate this program from the 1st of January.
Clean Sri Lanka වැඩසටහන මේ ජනවාරි මාසේ 1 වෙනිදා ඉඳන් අපි ඒක ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න පටන් ගන්නවා.
Meanwhile, during a visit to Kandy, the president addressed the media.
පළාත් සභා මැතිවරණ කොයි කාලෙද පැවැත්වෙන්නේ ඒකට නැවතත් නාම යෝජනා කැඳවනවද
පළාත් පාර්ලිමේන්තු මැතිවරණ 23 මාර්තු මාසෙ පැවැත්වීම සඳහා නාම යෝජනා කැඳවුවා.
Nominations were called in order to conduct the local government elections in March 2023. However, now some of the parties that existed at the time no longer exist. Therefore, a cabinet decision was taken to draft amendments to the relevant act to cancel the nominations. After it is presented to Parliament in January and subsequent to its approval, the local government elections will be conducted before the Sinhala and Tamil New Year. We will also conduct the provincial council elections within the upcoming year, as the political authorities of these institutions are necessary to provide leadership at the grassroots level.
පිරිපුන් ජීවිතයකට ඔබ සමගින් පෙරට Union Assurance.
Welcome to Cinnamon Life, South Asia's biggest entertainment hub, where awe awaits.
චන්දුරුසුමේ කාගෙන් මන අපේ සිග TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්.
Sadaharita Plantations Limited, celebrating 22 years of your trust.
Aspirations Education, a pioneer in overseas education. Meet our experts at top destinations worldwide. Your trusted and caring partner in overseas education.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Vijitha Herath assures that the government will not enter into any agreement that is harmful to Sri Lanka's economy. Speaking at a press briefing, the Foreign Minister clarified that only 2 memoranda of understanding were signed during President Anura Dissanayaka's state visit to India this week. He emphasized that claims of Sri Lanka entering into any other agreements with India, including an agreement to construct an oil pipeline between the two countries, are false. Sri Lanka's foreign minister also rejected claims that the president signed an agreement to implement the controversial ETCA agreement, adding that the agreement was only to continue discussions.
අපි දෙපාර්ශ්වයේ අතර අවබෝධතා ගිවිසුම් දෙකක් තිබුණා. ඒ පළවෙනි අවබෝධතා ගිවිසුම තමයි
We entered into 2 bilateral MOUs. Through the first, India agreed to host 1,500 Sri Lankan government employees for a 2-week training program. This will be an annual event for the next 5 years. The second MOU was on avoidance of double taxation. Those are the only 2 MOUs that were signed during the visit, and no other definite agreements were reached. I would like to reiterate that holding discussions does not automatically mean we reached agreements. Additionally, the Indian Prime Minister agreed to convert to a grant the Maho Anuradhapura railway signal project, which was implemented through an Indian loan scheme. Discussions were also held on energy infrastructure development based on agreements in principle. During these discussions, we gave our consent to continue the Sampur solar power plant, for which agreements had already been reached. Discussions were also held on the possibility of obtaining liquefied natural gas from India, and we agreed to continue the dialogue on joint wind power projects. This is not a betrayal of our country, nor is it harmful. We also agreed to continue discussions regarding the proposed oil pipeline between India, Sri Lanka and the United Arab Emirates. The Sri Lankan government owns 24 oil tanks in the Trincomalee tank farm, while 15 have been handed over to the IOC, which leaves 61 tanks. There is a previous agreement to jointly renovate and utilize those tanks. We agreed to continue discussions on that project. The only action we took in that regard is to agree to continue the discussion. Claims that the agreement on ETCA was signed during the India visit are completely false. We will never enter into agreements that are harmful to Sri Lanka's economy. That is our fundamental policy.
අපේ රටේ ආර්ථිකයට හානිදායක වෙන ගිවිසුම් වලට අපි කොහෙත්ම එළඹෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක අපේ මූලික ප්‍රතිපත්තිය.
Now, the International Monetary Fund will include a review of Sri Lanka's new economic measures announced in Parliament recently by President Anura Dissanayaka. The President, during his address to the House on Wednesday, announced a series of economic measures, including an increase to the payee tax threshold to 150,000 rupees from 100,000 rupees at the present, and increasing withholding tax to 10% from 5% at present. IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak said the Executive Board is expected to convene soon to discuss the staff-level agreement for the 3rd review under Sri Lanka's Extended Fund Facility Program and potentially approve its 4th tranche of $333 million.
When can we expect the IMF Executive Board to take up Sri Lanka's review for the next tranche of the Extended Fund Facility? And secondly, just over 24 hours ago, Sri Lanka's president announced that there will be several revisions to the tax income of the government and other revisions of revenue. Can the IMF elaborate further on those measures?
On November 23rd, IMF staff and the Sri Lankan authorities reached staff-level agreement on the 3rd review under the EFF arrangement. Once the review is completed or approved by our executive board, Sri Lanka will have access to $333 million. With respect to what comes next, the executive board meeting is expected to take place in the coming months following the implementation by the authorities of the prior actions. And on the specific question on the measures that were just announced, I don't have a full assessment for you at this time, but we will come back to you. And of course, the staff will include a full assessment of these measures in the staff report that will be published following approval approval by the executive board of the program.
Fast track your career from O levels with eSoft.
ඩයිබටිසෝල් සීනිවලින් පරිස්සම් වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
ප්‍රයිම් ගෲප් ලංකාවේ ප්‍රථම වතාවට හඳුන්වා දෙන ලෑන්ඩ් ලීසින් ලේසියෙන් මීටමක්.
Single 1111 up to 60% off from the 11th November to the 17th of November.
Kalani wire කිසිගින්නක් නෑ.
කිසිගින්නක් නෑ. Kalani Fire Shield Wire.
Apico Mattress. Sama sapata nidiyana Apico Springs for mattress madili rasakin.
Now, meanwhile, Deputy Minister of Industries and Entrepreneurship Development Chaturanga Besingha met with the World Bank's country manager to discuss structural challenges that have hindered the growth of Sri Lankan industries. The discussion covered the absence of a national integrated industrial plan, limited access to capital for industrialists, weak institutional support for industrial growth, a lack of anti-dumping policies to protect local industries, and the shortage of a skilled workforce essential for sustainable development. The adverse impacts of the recent tax policy changes and the challenges arising from the non-performing debt were also discussed. The Deputy Minister said World Bank delegates emphasized their focus on the Business Ready Index, technical assistance for research, and state-owned enterprise restructuring. In other news, a gazette was published establishing a presidential task force to implement the government's Clean Sri Lanka initiative. The Clean Sri Lanka initiative, rather the presidential task force, comprises 18 members, including President Secretary Dr. N.S. Kumar Nayaka, the commanders of the Tri-Forces, Acting Inspector General of the Police, and Chairman of the Urban Development Authority. This initiative aligns with the President's policy statement, A Thriving Nation, A Beautiful Life, and aims to launch a transformative national mission addressing the well-being, reconciliation and progress of the nation. It is tasked with planning, guiding, implementing and reviewing the progress and completing the Clean Sri Lanka program within the mandated period. It is also tasked with creating an organizational structure to facilitate the implementation of the program from national to rural levels. Additionally, the task force will work to raise funds for the Clean Sri Lanka Fund and provide necessary guidance on managing the fund. Now, in other local economic news, the government announced its decision on extending the period for rice importation until the 10th of January next year. The final agreement on the decision is expected to be confirmed at the cabinet meeting scheduled on the 23rd of this month. Cabinet spokesperson Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa said yesterday that measures will be taken to extend the rice import period. Accordingly, a gazette notification formalizing the extension will be published on the 24th of December. Additionally, Director General of Customs and Customs Media spokesperson Sivali Aruguda highlighted that the current authorization for rice imports will expire today at midnight and stated that any stock of rice will need to be re-exported after the deadline without the extension. In news in brief, Supreme Court upheld the death sentence imposed on former DIG Vas Gunawardena and 4 others, while the Colombo Magistrate Court granted bail to Prem Thakur, the Indian owner of the Gol Marbles team in the Lanka T10 Super League, accused of match fixing, and former director of the Colombo Crimes Division, ASP Neville Silva, is further remanded.
The Colombo High Court today announced that the Supreme Court has upheld its previous ruling confirming the death sentence imposed on former DIG Vas Gunawardena and 4 others convicted of abduction and murder of businessman Mohammed Siam in 2013. The decision was announced today when prisons officials presented before the court the 5 defendants in the case, including former Deputy Inspector General of Police Vas Gunawardena and his son Ravindu Gunawardena. Colombo High Court Judge Aditya Patabandige informed the defendants that their appeals had been rejected and the death sentence imposed by a 3-member Colombo High Court bench had been upheld. The Colombo Magistrates Court granted bail to the Indian owner of the Gol Marbles team in the Lanka T10 Super League, Prem Thakur, who was placed under remand custody over allegations of match fixing during the Lanka T10 cricket tournament in Kandy's Pallekele Stadium. The case was heard before Colombo Chief Magistrate Tilina Gamage today, where Thakur's legal representatives requested his release on bail, and in response, Senior State Counsel Udara Karunatilaka, representing the prosecution, requested that the court issue a suitable order allowing the suspect to remain in Sri Lanka. The court released Thakur on a cash bail of 500,000 rupees along with two sureties of 5 million each and imposed an overseas travel ban, ordering him to appear before the Special Investigation Unit for Prevention of Offences Related to Sports every Wednesday. Former Director of the Colombo Crimes Division, Assistant Superintendent of Police Neville Silva, who was remanded in custody following his arrest, has been further remanded until December 30th. ASP Silva was arrested by the Criminal Investigation Department at the Police Field Force Headquarters on December 9th and produced before court on December 10th. The CID had launched an investigation based on a complaint that ASP Silva allegedly acted in a biased manner towards a complainant when investigating a case filed with the CID in August 2023.
Welcome back. Now in your business news, the Colombo Stock Exchange experienced another day of positive sentiment and increased gains, closing in green for a 19th consecutive day. After yesterday's volatile trading, the market rebounded strongly with significant gains today. Amidst the increased participation from retail and high net worth investors, the ASPI closed the day in green at 14,811, gaining 156 points. With multiple off-board transactions, turnover was at a 10-month high of 92 billion rupees, marking an increase of 95.8% from the monthly average of 4.7 billion. The capital goods sector led the turnover by 25%, followed by the banking and food and beverage and tobacco sectors, jointly contributing 28% of the total overall turnover. There was a net foreign outflow of 226.9 million rupees. Meanwhile, on the external front, the Sri Lankan rupee continued to depreciate against the US dollar for a fourth consecutive day, closing at 292.68 against the US dollar compared to 291.28 the previous day. The rupee also depreciated against other major currencies such as the euro, the Chinese yuan, the Australian dollar, and appreciated against other major currencies such as the British pound sterling and the Japanese yen. Now let's take a look at the rupee exchange rates during the day. Welcome back. Now, during an informative session hosted by the world-renowned consultancy firm KPMG, the Associate Director of Tax and Regulatory, Radhini Thomas, provided key insights on several conditions that importers will have to follow when importing vehicles subsequent to the official lifting of the ban on vehicle imports by February next year. Meanwhile, Principal for Tax and Regulatory of the KPMG, Rifka Ziad, spoke on the uncertainty of the government providing further relief on the advanced personal income tax.
KPMG Sri Lanka Academy today conducted a seminar on the roadmap for reforming taxes. During the seminar, a discussion took place on the relaxation of vehicle import restrictions.
So before suspension, we had a tariff guide, the customs duty, PALSES, all of that, and we were collecting taxes out of it. So the reference here of permission being granted for vehicle importation, at the moment we do not see any other tax changes or rate changes, but those changes can come as part of the law.
Yes, Rifka. So I think President also mentioned in his speech that this restriction will be removed in a phased out manner. So I think we have already got a Gazette notification, so which says that public passenger transport vehicles and special purpose vehicles, and also certain items which is classified under HS coding 52. So that restriction has been immediately lifted. And also they are expecting vehicles that transport goods and vehicles for private use will be lifted from February 2025. There are certain conditions which has been imposed, though they have removed the restriction. of the importation, yes, there are little conditions which has to be followed. So something like the imported vehicle to be registered with the Department of Motor Traffic within 90 days from the date of bill of entry or the cast date. So if you failure to register, there is a late fee of 3% of the CIF value which will be imposed. So there is a maximum cap also which has been given. So maximum would be the 45% of the CIF value can be levied as the late fee. And also if any motor vehicle is imported by the trader, it has to be registered by the buyer. And also an importer who imports more than 25% of vehicles during a month or during a period of 6 months and has violated 90-day rule, or then he will be suspended for a minimum of 3 years from importation. And also where an importer who violates the regulation at the point of importation, the vehicles will be re-exported and the costs will have to be borne by the importer himself. So there's been why these restrictions and has been imposed is basically to safeguard the foreign exchange and of course trying to remove the crowding out effect of unnecessary vehicles being imported into Sri Lanka.
Meanwhile, the seminar also focused on amendments to the advanced personal income tax.
And I think there's a statement that is being made. Are we making any public appeal that the tax bracket is expanded for the 18% category as well? If the government really and honestly wanting to stop the brain drain, I think we need to see. I think the government was initially expecting even to give a concession, the personal relief at 200,000, but at the moment they have managed to only bring it down to 150,000. I think this is all part of the negotiations with the IMF and what has already been agreed with the IMF at the initial stages as well. So I don't know, I feel certain angle their hands also may be tied. So I'm not too sure whether they will go on to give further relief onto APIT. May be questionable at the moment until they implement this and then see, because even to implement this, they need to collect taxes from another area. So they need to identify from where they're going to collect the taxes from. So I do not see further being given, but yes, right. And then I think another...
I don't know whether the audience have realized. So if you get a monthly salary of say 5 lakhs, now you are going to save 20,500 here. So that's not a bad thing.
I also got a question on email asking whether the lump sum taxes which are applicable on bonus be affected due to the proposed APIT changes. Yes, there would be an effect. So I think they will need to do the APIT tables again as well. So I think these because it's just a statement that has been made now, but we might need to wait and see how the APIT tables are done. And yes, then the lump sum table will also have an effect in your total calculation changes.
That's an important point there, no, Rivka? Don't get your bonuses in December, no?
Keep it till Aurudu. I knew you were going to say this.
So, yeah, it's a tax planning opportunity for everyone.
Now in your sports news, Sri Lanka cricket announced significant amendments to its constitution, including a substantial reduction in the total number of voting members from 147 to just 60, following an extraordinary general meeting held today.
Voting rights are determined solely based on the level of cricket played by each member club, with all qualified clubs and associations being entitled to only one vote. Sri Lanka Cricket said it aims to ensure equitable representation and streamlined decision-making. The statement added that the membership unanimously approved the establishment of the Audit Committee, Investment and Budget Committee and Related Party Transactions Committee to enhance financial transparency. The amendments are expected to create a level playing field for cricketing stakeholders, reflecting merit and contribution to cricket development across Sri Lanka. SLC believes these constitutional amendments will foster a culture of professionalism, transparency and meritocracy, paving the way for the holistic growth of cricket in Sri Lanka. In addition to the above changes, the election committee for SLC for the year 2025, headed by retired Court of Appeal Judge M.S. Malani Gunaratne and 4 other members, was also appointed during the extraordinary general meeting. The election committee will oversee the preparations and conduct the SLC's coming elections, scheduled to take place in 2025.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you. Have a great night.